Welcome everybody back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe. Kyle is also here with me. Today is a episode that it's just us chatting. Again, thankfully. So how's it going, Kyle?
Not too bad. How are you doing, Joe?
Great. Beautiful day here in Breckenridge. It's been raining for the past 2 days, which is wonderful since we were almost on fire. The whole town was on pre-evacuation notice for a bit, and it was really creepy, but glad we're back to normal.
Yeah, I'm glad your town didn't burn down.
Me too.
Must have been scary.
Yeah, it was a little creepy. I had my laptop and my hard drive, so it's like, I could lose everything else. Because, I have most of my pictures on here, so it was good, but still, I would have lost a lot. It would have sucked. A lot of family pictures that I don't have digital yet.
All of our work too, gone.
A lot of books. Oh no, ours is all on hard drives. I took primarily all my portable hard drives and a couple laptops, and that was it.
Oh, good.
But yeah, we would have been slowed down for a bit.
Yeah, which would have really sucked.
Yeah. So let's dig in, I guess, to what we've been up to. There's been a lot happening lately, including the I guess maybe let's first talk about this extended state DMT stuff, DMTx, that we're kind of collaborating with a little bit with Daniel McQueen. We don't necessarily have an official project role yet, but I think we're looking at it to see what's going on there. The idea of extended state DMT is to use high-end medical equipment, doctors, professional medical staff like nurses in the room, and just make sure that people have the ability to be in these states as safe as possible, and I guess work up to longer and longer DMT states through, I don't really know what to call it, an infusing device, like keeping the nanograms per milliliter consistent in your blood for long
Aren't they using some sort of like anesthesia machine, or that's the technology that they want to use?
Yeah, exactly. So, theoretically you could do it with an IV drip bag, but it wouldn't be as precise. They want to have it be as precise as possible, so it's as scientific as possible. Which, people don't get any ideas. Like, don't be putting DMT into your IV bags. It's not necessarily the best move. I think it's very dangerous to do it if you're using non-medical grade DMT. And none of us have access to medical grade DMT. Don't even think the DMT your buddy from wherever sold you is medical grade. It's not.
Yeah, what was that event like? I wasn't able to make it out to Boulder to see it. You were there. You're live streaming it, so I got to watch it through the live stream.
That was quite the adventure trying to live stream. Learned a lot. But yeah, Dr. Andrew Gallimore, who's working at some technical university in Okinawa, he came out to talk about DMT, extended state DMT, because he kind of developed this protocol. And he was talking about really interesting ways of modeling life. So there's this kind of computer simulation that has very simple rules, 4 rules, and they've extended it out to an enormous, XY grid, and really interesting stuff happens. Stuff that looks a lot like life. It's just certain formations happen and they perpetuate, and higher order entities happen in these complex systems. It's called in systems theory, it's called emergent phenomena. So yeah, emergent properties happen, in the reductionist model of the world, the brain is so complex that an emergent phenomena of the brain is mind. That's the way they think of it. So or the emergent phenomena of people being together is something like the United States. That's, it's not necessarily in the blueprint that'll happen, but it's an emergent thing that happens kind of unexpectedly. So he kind of was implying that because of this complexity and, the lack of real information we have about the universe, we only know 5, 10, 20% about the universe so far. There's a lot that we don't understand yet. We don't really have devices to monitor do science on, whatever, there's a lot left that we need to figure out in short. And so as a result of the emergent phenomena thing and our, I don't really know how to say it politely. Like, science is super confident, right? Like, science is kind of the best thing we have right now for knowing stuff, kind of, other than indigenous knowledge, maybe. But science doesn't have data on everything. Like, there's still a lot of stuff that's unmeasured, and we don't have tools to measure those things. Things related to physics. We had to make this enormous device, the what do they call it? That big particle accelerator in Switzerland, CERN, to look for the Higgs boson. Like, we had to develop a multi-billion-dollar tool to get that going, and that's just one test. So that indicates that there's probably a bunch more of those we need to build, a bunch more, maybe millions more of those experiments to get closer and closer to knowing what we want to know about the universe and nature stuff. So, his suggestion was, as a result of those two things and the emergent properties of nature, that there's probably higher order entities, more complex entities than humans. Like, maybe the human mind is the most complex thing we know about currently, but there's even more complex things that we don't know about yet, just based on these two things, like, our lack of knowledge and emergent properties of complex systems. And that with DMT, you might actually run into them. And that's his theory. I don't know what I want to say is the answer. I think I'm ready to be surprised. I was thinking about this earlier. Like, as a quasi-agnostic, a religious agnostic in a sense, like, what is this thing I want to put up there as like a god? And it's, for me, it's kind of like this question mark. The holy question mark. Like, instead of a cross, it's the question mark. So, like, willing to be surprised at all times, and we don't know enough to worry, stuff like that.
I'm probably right there with you. After having so many strange experiences and having like my near-death experience and feeling like I talked to God or, talked to something, and then had like an experience with psilocybin that, I met entities and thought that was God. I don't know. It leaves me with more questions than answers. And I'm so curious to see how this research unfolds, if it unfolds, and what type of things it will find. It's just going into those realms. It just seems so crazy. And I can't imagine like being in that for so long, and what you'd be able to come back with, and what, like, it's just like so ineffable to even think about. It's unfathomable to be like, what would you find in there if you were able to stay in there for long enough?
Have we talked about the smoked DMT experience much on the show?
I don't think so.
So I've never smoked DMT. Have you?
Few times, but it's such a tricky compound.
Did you get past that threshold experience?
The last time I did it, it was interesting. I got there, I got to the door, and these things came out and they say, "Oh, welcome back." And I was like, "Oh man, yes." And they said, why are you coming back again?" And I was like, "Well, I'm curious, like I really just want to know, because I've never broken through fully." And they say, "You have multiple times, and you know what you need to do. So stop coming back until you start doing that stuff." And they said, this is like a carnival ride. It's a roller coaster. The lap bar goes across your lap, and it's over within 30 seconds. They're like, you're not going to remember much. Like psilocybin, on the other hand, that's probably the medicine you should work with. It's more like a day at the pool. You hang out, you get really hot, and then you go dive into the deep, dark waters, and you're able to work with that process down there in the depths. And you come up for a little bit, and you get nice and warm, you hang out, you relax at the pool, and then you dive back in. And, you might be able to bring something back out of that pool. But, the DMT experience is just like this roller coaster ride, and it's done pretty quickly. So that was my last experience with it, the last message that I got. So like, I've been curious, but after that I'm like, yeah, I don't know, I guess they are right. Like, there seems like there's a lot of work to be done in the physical world. And I have done a lot of mind exploration, and Yeah, it's probably good to get in my body and not constantly go out so far.
That is one of our regular comments, right? Like overuse is not necessarily the best thing. If you're using once weekly, twice weekly, might not be the best. You might be putting yourself at risk. But yeah, back to DMT, smoke DMT. You're effectively freebasing, right? You're freebasing this chemical. It can be a little harsh. And what happens, the way it's described often is this rocket ship into hyperspace. And that seems to be a consistent kind of report of DMT. It's infinitely complex visuals, like about as complex as your brain can generate or, take in. It's, far beyond the complexity your eyeballs can grasp, from what I understand. And fractals, just infinitely generating new fractals, potentially entities that want to show you stuff, teach you things. And yeah, one of the hallmark features of smoke DMT is that you forget stuff. You don't necessarily come back with it. And what we don't know, and what this particular project is kind of aiming at, is what happens, this DMTx project, what happens when we can remember, if we can remember. Like perhaps there's a type of supplement, maybe it's a blend of 3 amino acids, something that's simple, that helps you have a memory of this thing. We might not get there immediately, but maybe after 15 years of doing this research, we can get there. And one of the interesting things Daniel brought up, so like after Andrew was done talking about all this stuff, I was like, okay, I'm actually excited about this again. And because, I get a little bothered when people turn anything into a god. And people have done that with DMT. And it's troubling to me because people stop thinking clearly. They start making assumptions, and I don't know why it bothers me so much, but it does. Like, I feel like this field has so many super smart people in it, and it only breaks down when you start saying, yes, X is 100% true. And you don't necessarily have a good ground to stand on for that argument. Like that, you've run into this, like, Melchizedek dude, the flower of life thing.
I don't think so.
Have you seen that pattern that a lot of hippies have? It's like circles and circles, and it looks like a big flower. It's kind of like an ancient Chinese symbol.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He kind of repurposed it and has this whole sacred geometry thing. And I'm like, cool. Angels told you this? Great. Good for you, Melchizedek. So now you want people to not talk to angels and just talk to you and read your books and buy your shit, right? Cool. I personally think that there's a better way to go about that, having your own personal experiment, your own personal spiritual practice, as opposed to picking up the Book of Mormon and going, yep, seems legit. I'm going to follow this guy's angelically transmitted message instead of trusting myself. Like, I feel like there's something that it takes away personal agency, and I think that's bad. Yeah. So this DMT stuff brings that back. It allows you to do that in less than an hour. You're back to very much normal. In back, like probably 15 minutes, you're back to normal with smoke DMT. Maybe half an hour with afterglow stuff. But what happens when we're able to experiment on our own and talk to these complex entities that religious scholars have been talking about for a long time? What if they are the same thing? What if they're all in your mind? That's a very interesting hypothesis. What if they're external and DMT somehow mediates that conversation? Let's be surprised. Let's not say one or the other is going to happen. I'm a primate with sharp teeth. How do I know anything? Like, the scientific method is the only thing that like helps. And, to say for sure what something is. And even then it's a provisional truth that could be outmoded in as short as a couple weeks. Vitamin C is bad for you one day and it's the best thing in the world the next.
Right.
Same thing with coffee. Like, all this data, we need to improve science too. So maybe this DMT stuff will help us improve scientific methods and maybe come up with other ways of doing research. Maybe it's not all scientific method.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know, what kind of stuff makes you excited about this, or like what kind of questions did you have about this research?
I mean, I think, one thing is definitely like concern, like what would it be like to just catapult somebody out there into cyberspace, and what is it like to return? And then how are they going to like help those people get grounded, like, what are the adverse like effects of that? I mean, could you completely just destroy somebody by doing that? Because like we don't have a culture that really helps people integrate back into society. And so that's definitely a concern. But I mean, one thing, it's just like the mystery of life, like what can somebody find out there? I mean, I find that to be the most fascinating thing about like, are these entities real? Can we develop technologies to communicate with it? Or can we track it? Just because somebody has like a subjective experience of that, it'd be interesting if we could develop some sort of technology to record it, kind of like dream recording, or how could we develop tests to interact with it? Like if these things gave you instructions or gave you something, could you bring it back and manifest it? I don't know. It's going down the rabbit hole. There's just so much there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you think? Like you were at the talk, I got to live stream it, but
Right.
What type of feeling did you get from it? Like, were you excited about it, or?
Well, it's
like...
a whole different direction because it's not necessarily therapeutic. Maybe there's therapeutic angles to it, but we don't know that. I don't think anybody's injecting or smoking NN-DMT as a therapeutic thing. Actually, did we see that though recently, that somebody was doing that therapeutically in Mexico? NN-DMT?
I don't know.
Anyway, yeah, it's not clear it's therapeutic. What's interesting is the exploratory aspect of expanding our understanding of the human mind, and what perhaps it interacts with, and are there external things it interacts with? Our experience with transpersonal psychology and holotropic breathwork suggests that the human mind and psyche have access to stuff not physically, that doesn't make sense physically speaking. There's like some sort of, to throw out a overplayed hippie metaphor, there's this maybe higher dimensional order to things where everything is actually connected, and that's kind of ruled out, or not really ruled out, so proven by this spooky action at a distance thing, where two photons are shot in different directions. The polarity is flipped on one, and the other one flips at the same time through faster than light communication. So those two things are communicating at faster than the speed of light, which defies the law that says things can't move faster than the speed of light, which means that to me it means that there is a some sort of dimensionality where all points in the 3D space are actually one at a certain, from a certain perspective. So like, are psychedelics helping us figure that out or experience that in a certain way? Like perhaps. I don't know how I feel about it, but I feel like we should find out. I feel like we owe it to the human project to figure that out. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting. Has a lot of implications.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to think about like if those states are real, because like when you're in there, it feels so real. And are there other dimensions that you could just live in? That's what comes up when I think about it too. Like after I think that live stream, or maybe it was like beforehand when we were just talking about it, I just had this like idea of like time travel. Like what if like you could just like. I think Strassman had this book called Inner Paths to Outer Space, and kind of like, these molecules help transport us to like other worlds. Like, what if these molecules are kind of like these like transporters to like other dimensions, and like you could hang out in there, and like it's the ultimate VR, like except it's like somewhere completely different where like your soul or spirit goes. And then that just like questions of reality in general, like, what is all this right now? Could we just be a projection from somewhere else that has already developed this technology, and we're living in a DMT virtual reality? I don't know.
There's a lot of implications, man, as far as what is free will. We already kind of have an understanding in neuroscience that free will is kind of like a thing that's far beyond us. Like our body and mind have already reacted to things before we've even made the decision. So what if we went beyond that? There's so much more complexity in neuroscience that we have left to go for. This book, I think I talked about it, Homo sapiens and Homo Deus. So it's like a complete history of Homo sapiens. And then what's next? So the sequel is like the next chapter with transhumanist ideals, like what happens when we start embedding. We're already androids. Like I need a machine to see properly, my eyeglasses, and I pretty much have a super high-end computer as part of my body all day long.
Right.
Not to mention like where I live is just embedded with computer stuff. So like I'm pretty much an android cyborg already. What happens when we have even closer integration, like high-end augmented reality contact lenses or glasses that are all the time there, or like some sort of inner ear contact, or a way to just think and have your Google search triggered right by you thinking. This is going to happen. Whether it's good or not, it's up for debate. And what is it? Maybe better to just do DMT. Like I don't know. Like there's a lot of information that happens. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that comes up with the question of like life and death. And I know I've mentioned this like a few times on some of the episodes of like having that near death experience and then having this psilocybin experience where I went to this other world. And I like met these things and I said, oh my God, this is so familiar. Like I've been here before. And like, this is kind of like, feels like what it was like when I died that one night or came close to dying. And, that just like blew my mind that like, what if, like it could have really big implications on how we view death and how we view life. And, I think it would maybe change the course of, do we want to incorporate technologies or, I don't know. It's weird because like in those realms too, it's like, seems like a machine world where it's just like controlled by technology and like super advanced things. And maybe that is what we're moving towards. I don't know. It's just so fascinating. I mean, this is like really what I think about a lot of the time.
It's like a more beautiful you say technology, which makes us think of like computer chips, but it's seems substantially more complex and more beautiful than that, right? Like it's a simulation, but it's okay. Like that kind of thing. Another thing, I was just out to breakfast with my girlfriend and we talked for a little while. We were talking about this project, Psychedelics Today, and she goes, why exactly are you so interested in it? And I went on for like 15 minutes. And so the major thing is environmental collapse. Like it looks like we're on target to make the planet not quite habitable for humans. We're on track for that. Hopefully there's some techno-optimists, that's like a camp out there, that say through technology alone, we're going to be able to improve conditions on the planet where everything's going to be fine. And we're going to bring back extinct species, appropriately, not Jurassic Park, but, appropriately. So, we're going to be able to do that. And that would be great. Cool. Like, let's hope. But should we put all our eggs in that basket? I think there's a lot of data to suggest psychedelics improve our attitudes towards or heightens our environmental sentiments. So we have a stronger inclination to be more environmental, and we care about the planet more. Like, how do we fix this problem? And, I know a lot of people out there listening to this understand that. And that's something that I got early on from Stan Grof's books. He mentioned that a bunch. Like, this happens kind of spontaneously in psychedelics and with holotropic breathwork. also with transpersonal breath work. But yeah, so is this perhaps one of the most important things we can be doing, is promoting the safe, measured use of psychedelics to change the minds of humans, to get them to, not worship the stars on, whatever TV show is popular, but, worship their friends and family and become more environmentally conscious and do more good work. I think there's something there. And I think there's something right behind the curtain with this DMT stuff that could inform this. What if, in a short 45-minute intravenous DMT session supervised by all these people, you were able to become environmental, and, that was an optional upgrade you chose. You paid whatever it was, $250 to be in the room for a little bit. And then the doctors and nurses all went to the next room once you were stable. And like, that was just like a factory floor, like enlightenment factory. Like, I don't know what this is going to, we don't know what it's going to do is the thing. It could, it's almost like we can do like Rorschach wondering against this thing, because it's kind of like our imagination. Like, what do we imagine psychedelics are? And that's kind of what this thing is we can project against.
Yeah, I think it could have like, could be a very dualistic thing where it's like could propel us into the future, or it could possibly destroy us. Everybody could have like messiah complexes and like want to do crazy things.
I think as soon as we figured that out, we would stop. I hope.
Yeah. I mean, I hope, like, who knows? Yeah. I think a lot of people think some of these substances are enlightenment in a pill. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. The one thing that like interests me the most, and like when I think about this project and think about like this future research with DMT is, I'm thinking back about my experience with death and my experience with psilocybin and stuff like that. It's like when I was the farthest out there in these alien realms, and I'd look back and just look at my hand and realizing that this is weird. Like, out there, it's not that weird. And I think like our culture, we're trying to search for something in particular, and we kind of project things onto this external world of seeking something more novel and finding answers out there. But really, I mean, what I got out of the experience was like, this is the magic. Like, that's the cosmic womb that we go back to. Like, as strange as the psychedelic experience is, it's very comforting in some regard, because it's almost like that's where we come from. Like those mystical spiritual experiences. The weirdest thing about it is realizing that you have a body and that you're alive and you're on this earth. Like when you're dead and you're in those like realms where it's just spirit, consciousness, whatever, it's safe, it's normal, because that's just what it is. But as soon as like I realized I had a body and I'm living and like my actions can cause consequences, that's what freaks me out the most. I'm like, holy shit, like this is magic, to even just be embodied. And I mean, that's definitely makes me a little bit more environmental conscious and think about my actions on what I'm doing in life because of that.
So one of the things that made me get a philosophy degree was these weird existential crises that young people get, and it's very similar to that. It's like, what the fuck? I'm alive. I'm an actual animal crawling around on this planet. And is that it? Am I just a gerbil, or is there more than that? Like, how does one create meaning? And it sounds like with your death experience, like meaning was just infused everywhere, and it was like a nice, comfortable, meaningful space that was safe. And then being this vulnerable mammal on Earth, this little pebble rocketing through space. What? Like, how does that even
trip
work?
It is the trip, like.
And then you look at the scope of the universe.
Yeah.
And you just, your mind is blown. And how do you, I don't know, how do you go from there? What is there to figure out? And I think we're at this point in cultural evolution in the Western world where religion has just about expired. Like the Christian religion, as traditionally played out, is done. people don't believe these stories the way that held culture together before. Like that, like it was really like a cultural anchor. Like it helped keep the culture together, and that's why it was effective. It instilled order. You didn't steal and kill from each other. And what people need to recognize is that this humanitarian ethos that we have right now is Christian. It's Christian, and we're just not recognizing it as that. We have to understand it is a Christian morality. And how do you argue it? It's really impossible to argue. You argue it with Christian logic. And, is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. I don't know what the right thing is, but you are doing humanitarian stuff, and you are operating most likely within a Christian ethos via humanitarianism. And how do we get some sort of solid footing? I think we need to figure that out. I think we need to be on some sort of stable ground that gives us meaning. And I think philosophy and psychedelics can help us get there. Assuming we're in community, not getting alienated, not getting messiah complexes and all this stuff. Like, how do we do it healthfully? And that's kind of what we're trying to help people do in our class. But what I found is it's being engaged in your process. Like, don't think you're finished. Don't think you'll never get there. Stay engaged in your process via journaling, breath work, whatever kind of regular practice you have, like yoga, tai chi, whatever. And being engaged in that process is what generates that feeling of meaning. I think that's the best I've got, and that's pretty much what our teachers have been saying to me for a long time. How do you, like, I don't know, do you struggle with that idea of meaning much?
Yeah, all the time. Especially after I had that accident. That was a huge thing. I didn't really know how to live, I couldn't figure out why people were doing the things that they were doing and why people were even, believing the things that they were believing, because I was just so far removed from it at that point. And coming back here, it just seemed like a strange alien world of, then how do you make meaning out of it? And I still struggle with it, definitely. After doing all this inner work for the past however many years, I still struggle with it because I think the culture doesn't allow you to actually integrate certain experiences, because we're so fast moving, and if you slow down a bit, you kind of get swept behind. So it's this weird balance where a lot of my experiences tell me to slow down, and there's not a lot to figure out in life, and just enjoy it. Just enjoy the ride and learn how to laugh a little bit and not take things so seriously. But yet we live in this culture where we have to take things so seriously. And if we slow down a bit, we get swept away. It's like, oh shit. Like, I'm not hustling to get a job to make money. And then you're like in debt, and then you're at the bottom of the food chain, it's just like, So, that's what I struggle with the most, is just living in such a fast-paced culture that really, or maybe like the capitalistic society where it's like things, you always need to be like exerting energy in some sense, because money is energy. And so it's like constantly, all right, just need to keep exerting it because that's what keeps it going. And
so back to Messiah Complex, I'm almost finished this audiobook biography of Elon Musk. He's the guy who is running SpaceX, Tesla Motors, Solar City, and the Boring Company. Some really moonshot ideas, kind of literally. And his drive personally is to save the human race. And he has this capitalist industrialist attitude, but it's all with the express purpose of saving the human race. And, number one, from fossil fuel dependence and just keep burning shitty stuff into the atmosphere and, accelerating climate change, that's kind of eliminated to a degree between solar panels to a degree and electric cars. And, the Boring Company is talking about making hyperloops, like high-speed transit, between
That thing's pretty
cities.
cool.
Like 10 minutes from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, which is typically a 4-hour drive.
Yeah.
And, it's fascinating. And that cuts down a ton of emissions. And beyond that, our planet is at extreme risk all the time from asteroid strikes, whatever, comets. And the SpaceX project is to get us extrasolar. Like, how do we become a multiplanetary species? And that's something I actually am a pretty strong believer in. A lot of people go, oh, fix this planet first, or you're going to screw up other planets. I'm like, well, how much value is there in an unscrewed up other planet when there's zero life? Like, how do we, that's another thing, like meaning, value, life. Like, how do you pin that down? I don't know. I don't know. The most conserving the most complex things maybe is where the asset is. Like, DNA is something that's very rare, very complex, and maybe it's the thing we do. That's why people have kids, right? To preserve their own DNA in a lot of ways. That's the genetic underpinning, but so like maybe that's what us as a species needs to do. Like, how do we preserve this planet as much as possible, go beyond the solar system, go to other planets so a single asteroid doesn't kill everything. And I don't know. I think there's something there, but that's obviously a little bit of a Messiah thing that Elon Musk is dealing with. But is it really that foreign of an idea? Like, is it really that crazy that surviving on the planet has meaning? Like, stuff I struggle with. Like,
I go back and forth between this all the time of thinking, like, are we stewards of the earth? And is that like what we're here to do, is to steward the earth and to just keep this paradise alive? Or is like our future to get off the planet and go explore other like galaxies and dimensions? And I think we could do both. Like, and I think like Star Wars is a really great example of that, where you have like these advanced cultures just living in harmony with the earth, and I mean, we don't really know that because it's just a story, but the way the old ones make it seem, it's like, Luke's out in the desert and they're farming, but they have like these spaceships that can go other places. And like, I think it might be a mix eventually. And I don't understand why we don't invest more money into space exploration. I mean, that's just too fascinating to not. And
people are doing it, man. People are doing it.
Well,
the
yeah,
stock price is
definitely.
I looked this morning for SpaceX. It's like $358 a share, which is enormous for SpaceX. That's Elon Musk's space company. And Jeff Bezos, who is the, I think, majority stakeholder in Amazon, put in billions of his own dollars to fund his own space exploration company. Because these people are looking at, mining operations. Like, doesn't it just make sense to do stuff that's risky to the planet, not on the planet?
Yeah.
Like, if you're doing heavy industry, like, it seems risky to do it around humans. Like, are we going to really build more nuclear power plants on fault lines like in Fukushima? Odds are yeah, because it's just big industry making dumb decisions.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about long-term thinking. It's all about quarter over quarter profits for large multinational, multi-billion-dollar companies. And I don't know. I don't know the best solution, but top minds, I hope, are working on it, and I hope psychedelics play part of this. Like, this whole micro to medium dose thing for creativity, I think, is stuff we should be really applying to our top engineers for this stuff. I'm sure a lot of people at SpaceX and Tesla and Solar City are working with psychedelics on the down low to come up with great solutions to the problems they're working on, and hopefully it helps. Hopefully it's really a positive solution. I don't know. I don't personally want to trash the planet. Like, from a greedy perspective, I would love it to just stay the way it is right now, or even be better than it is right now in terms of biodiversity, healthy habitats. I want to scuba dive. I want to ski and snowboard forever. I would like to be able to surf and not, think that the ocean's going to poison me if I go in it.
Yeah, and it's rapid fish die off. It's kind of scary. And I think, like, I don't know, some of that I don't know, in my opinion, it comes back to like wanting to save the world. Like we create these like really short fixes to save the world instead of like thinking about like long term. Like how do we just like invest into these technologies to maybe get off the planet and explore like other possibilities? You know, I'm a Leo. My ego definitely shines sometimes. I'm like, and especially after that accident, I'm like, I want to save the world. And one of the best pieces of advice that I got from like one of my teachers was like, you're not going to save the world, you know? And it was so like humbling to be like, yeah, you're right. Like I can only do so much. And, you know, I think that's what we all can do, like just to do little parts in your community. And I think having a big vision, like, hey, we should probably explore other planets and whatnot. But
so I think that ties into long-term planning. Like how do we long-term integrate psychedelics into our culture? Neil Goldsmith in our masterclass for Navigating Psychedelics course mentioned that he doesn't believe in immediate legalization, regulation of everything, because, you know, maybe with a well-reasoned 20-year plan, we can make that work. That was his opinion. But like maybe it's worth waiting that long so it's integrated well and skillfully into our culture. Maybe it's just decriminalized. But, you know, there's going to need to be a lot of drug education around that still, because expanded access leads to shady stuff, shady dealings, and chemists are tricky. But, you know, meaning you think you buy LSD, but you buy 2,5-IN bomb instead. So, like, how do we, as a psychedelic group of people trying to solve these problems, act in a skillful way that has a long-term meaningful impact? I think educating each other, opening up to people when it's okay to open up to people about your personal use or at least your interest in the science. I think that's huge. There's a lot.
Yeah, it's a big question and really tough to answer. And I think, you know, it is crappy. I mean, we do want some of these medicines to be available ASAP for people that are suffering. But I was thinking about this the other day, or maybe it was a few weeks ago, and maybe people will be upset, but it's okay.
Bring it on.
This whole idea about like psychedelics and I think because I answered a question on Quora about like what happens when psychedelics become legal.
You did a good job on that.
Thanks. And like, I really don't think that psychedelics are going to heal the world in some sense. Like if they became legalized and became mainstream, because not everybody's going to take them. And, you know, if it does become legal, there's at least for therapy, it's going to be for people suffering for certain disorders. But I think, you know, it comes back to this thing again of projecting this idea out onto the external world, and we're projecting this idea that psychedelics are going to save the world. And really, it's just like any other medicine. Sometimes they're like band-aids. There's some real core issues that like we need to work on. And I think this kind of comes back to integration. I mean, yeah, we could legalize psychedelics. People could be going far out and having these extraordinary experiences. But I mean, if we don't make like the cultural changes, things aren't going to change. It's just a band-aid. Like if like we do believe that the world is at risks and that climate change is really happening, then like we need to start making small changes to make bigger changes. Like we need to get more involved in our community. Maybe it's not like having to commute and fly across the world for certain things and like use up all this fossil fuel, and really think about like local action. Are we going to do that? Probably not. It would be nice if we did become a little bit more sustainable, but, you know, just because psychedelics are legal doesn't mean everybody's just going to turn off and start farming and not drive their car or take flights to Hawaii to vacation. It's still going to happen. And, you know, I think there's a lot of like deep-rooted traumas in like our ancestral lineages and just stuff that, you know, as a culture we're not ready to face. But you know, I have hope for the future. I'm pretty optimistic.
Yeah, it's kind of a choice, right? We have the choice of choosing fear or hope. Fearful, depressed people with no hope don't start businesses. They don't start new projects. They don't really get out of bed with a smile, you know. The day is not that bright. So kind of it's a no-brainer. It has a lot greater yield to choose to be optimistic, and that's kind of a Robert Anton Wilson thing. I forget, have you spent much time checking his work out, Robert Anton Wilson?
No.
You know who he is?
A little bit. So
buddies with Tim Leary, editor at Playboy for a while. He wrote the Illuminatus trilogy, Prometheus Rising, a number of popular books that covered psychedelics. Very powerful mind, very funny writer. Check out some of his YouTube sometimes,
cool.
Listeners. He's got a few on the Psychedelic Salon, and I'll try to include one in the show notes if I can remember. But yeah, one of my favorite writers ever. And he had a daughter die at a young age, and he also was a sufferer of polio. So, he had plenty of reasons to be depressed and pessimistic, but he chose optimism. And he had some really interesting psychedelic experiences on mescaline and many other drugs that he writes about quite a bit and talks about. So yeah, I think there's plenty to be optimistic about, and especially if you're living in the U.S. or like a Western nation, like it's pretty easy to develop a life. Once you get rid of your traumas and your baggage, develop a life that's pretty fun. It's really not that difficult to develop a fun, enjoyable life, assuming you can clear some of that trauma either through breath work or psychedelic therapies or whatever it is. Maybe there's some legal therapies like EMDR or float tanks available to you. Once you get through that heavy baggage, stuff gets way better, better. I think that's why a lot of people come to psychedelics. They're kind of like not psyched with their life, and they think, oh, look at this super alien thing that all these fun looking people at Burning Man apparently are on. I want to be like one of those fun looking people with a crazy art car and funny costume. I want to be like that. And how do I be like that? Is it psychedelics? Maybe, but realize that there's a lot of ways through psychedelics. I hope that doesn't sound too ranty, but I think there's something there. It's like there is a way to have a great life. Psychedelics may or may not play a part in that for you. And for people who are suffering from really serious trauma, psychedelics might be one of the best, quickest options to resolve that. Like, in 3 visits to an MDMA therapist, maybe you're done.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't mean that whole rant about they're not helpful. They're definitely helpful. Obviously, we wouldn't be doing this show if we didn't believe in that. I just like to try and remain a little skeptical about the fantasy of if it became legal, it'd be a wonderful world and everybody would be happy. I mean, I think human suffering is going to continue, and we just need to realize that.
There's a lot there. I'm actually going to pull up your the question you answered. Let's see. The guy was pretty convinced that the whole world was going to change immediately.
Right. Yeah.
And it was all because of psychedelics and the transcendent things that it revealed.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, they've been around for a while, and indigenous cultures have been using them. I mean, obviously, maybe not as. I guess it's still new, but they've been around for thousands of years. And if that was the case, if cultures have been using plants for thousands of years, wouldn't we be enlightened? Wouldn't we not be where we're at right now? I don't know. I think if people have been using them, and we're still suffering, then, I don't think too much is going to change. But, they are helpful. Obviously, we wouldn't be talking about it if we didn't feel that way.
Yeah, we wouldn't have the show if otherwise. Yeah. It's just not that everybody's going to use it. Yeah. So the headline here is what will happen when psychedelics become used for therapy? Core is being shitty. It's not showing the full answer, but it pretty much implied that. Oh no, here it is. The psychedelic experience leads to a paradigm shift. People will have a transcendental awareness. He's kind of hinting that it'll be permanent. The authority of government will be thwarted by the authority of the absolute. Yeah, so obviously it sounds really inflated. There is not a permanent paradigm shift for people. People can do heavy doses of LSD and continue being a hardcore executive at ExxonMobil. I'm not saying that Rex it's done LSD a lot, but theoretically you could do a bunch of psychedelics and still be a very powerful executive, and be doing massive harm to the planet. Perhaps there's often the line that if you're a sociopath, LSD makes you a more skillful sociopath. Charles Manson is an example of that. And we have to understand that there are these dark sides to this stuff. There is a shadow side to psychedelics.
Yeah, and plus a lot of spiritual bypassing too. I mean, people have experiences and they think like they've worked through their shit and they just spiritual bypass everything and they go on doing the same things. I mean,
I saw some really dark shit in the Boston Burning Man world. Really dark shit. And it was, they were, theoretically psychedelically informed folks, but, executing some really bad behavior on each other. And it was not great. And, to me, that's exactly it. Like, oh yeah, we're so enlightened now because we've, danced with the elves or whatever. And no, you're still being a super asshole, sexual predator person. And it doesn't matter that you drank ayahuasca 35 times. You're still an asshole. You still did really not great things to people. And so what that you bought that mansion and let young girls move in? Nope. Because you're a predator, it makes you an asshole. And yeah, his last line, the authority of the government will be thwarted by the authority of the absolute. It's just like, yeah, man, I don't know. You have this afterglow from your psychedelic session. You just got on Quora and started asking questions that didn't necessarily have a good grounding.
I mean, sometimes I like to think that, if you abide by astrology or maybe the yoga traditions, that we're moving, past the Kali Yuga. So like the darkness will be overthrown by love and light. I mean, it's a nice idea. Maybe it will happen. Maybe we will become more loving to each other. That would be sweet.
I like this kind of idea that there's these natural laws. I don't know what they are, but there's these natural laws. And the more in harmony you operate with these natural laws, the more effortless and effective your life becomes, the happier it becomes. And it seems to be like a little shift, like a slight shift from what he's talking about. It's like, yeah, you follow these rules that are good for humans and good for the planet, and you have a better life. And, figuring out what those rules are is the trick. The Hindu traditions have their version, the mystical Christian traditions have their version, but maybe there's some similarities. That's kind of the project of the Theosophical Society from Helena Blavatsky. And I don't know, did we ever talk about this on the show, the Jiddu Krishnamurti?
I don't think so.
So Krishnamurti was this spiritual teacher that you guys might want to check out. He was kind of like this Western world, late 1800s project to develop the new Messiah. They wanted to kind of manufacture him the same way they pick the Dalai Lama. They wanted to make their own. And they found this kid in India and schooled him and, brought him up in all of their own traditions, spent a ton of money developing him. And he eventually said, no, you guys are crazy. Like, I don't want to be part of your project, but because you've educated me so well, I am able to wax poetic on all sorts of philosophical subjects, from enlightenment to day-to-day suffering to whatever, in a really skillful kind of non-dogmatic way. And that's why he's so popular now, Jiddu Krishnamurti. And there's a lot of stuff that he's written that's, pretty valuable to us in the psychedelic world. I'm trying to pull up a quick quote just to kind of give a quick example.
I never heard of him or read anything
he's
from
amazing.
him.
It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Knock that one out of the park. The constant assertion of belief is an indication of fear. Yeah. Tradition becomes our security, and when the mind is secure, it is in decay. So that kind of comes back to that whole Whitehead concept of process. Like, we should always be in process and engaged in our own process. And how do we do that? It's just coming back, the constant return.
Yeah.
It's this practice that is critical. It's not very dogmatic. It's all about you, working on you and being the expert on you, and not putting your faith in something external. It's so easy to find a cult leader.
Yeah.
don't do it.
I recently just watched a documentary about that, like how smart, intelligent people get caught up in cults. I forget where it was.
Did you see that headline that Catherine McLean was posting and a few others were posting about Enlighten Next? It was the Cohen, the group that was kind of aligned with Ken Wilber.
That's what I think I saw. It was up in Foxborough, up in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it was in Mass.
That's the little documentary that I watched. Yeah.
So it was this whole integral movement that I was kind of, when I was doing my stuff in Boulder with Evolver, I kept rubbing up against these people who were aligned with Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber, for those who don't know, is this integral theorist. He kind of made this pseudo-religious concept of stages of development for humans and for cultures and stuff. And he tried to map every philosopher and religious thinker out there onto the same grid. Said nobody's wrong, they're just at different levels of development. They're at their own level of, so like he was this upward spiral of development. So that was his kind of theory. And he was really into Zen meditation, Zazen. And this guy Andrew Cohen, I think his name was, kind of developed a whole religion right next to it, regarding Zazen and all these different diamond path Zen meditation. So Zen is just brutal awareness. So like sitting on the mat for 12 hours a day and washing the dishes the rest of the day. Like there's no flourishes. It's just being there. And that's great. If you want to do that, it's cool. But it's not for all of us. But they were convinced it was the only path forward. They said holotropic breath work is not effective because it's regressive. Look at you. You're there crying and sucking on your thumb. What therapeutic value is there in that? That's regressive. That's not working you towards enlightenment. Was kind of their thing. It wasn't really necessarily about mental health. It was about enlightenment for them. And yeah, to me, that showed kind of an immaturity, and they wouldn't really act. Like Stan Groff was really interested in this guy's theories, Ken Wilber, but Ken Wilber would never actually engage with him in debate.
Interesting.
Yeah, you should ask Lenny about that sometime. There was some really interesting discussions. Like Ken Wilber's refutation of Groff was something super obscure, like the third axiom of Kant or something stupid like that. It's like I don't think Groff has it because of his technical error regarding Kant, and it was totally tertiary, like not even related to the discussion.
Yeah, I think I heard Lenny talk one time about like maybe Groff's stance on Wilber, and he said, he's really smart, he's a philosopher, but he lacks clinical experience. And
yeah, it's super brain, but got caught up. He's not even really engaging in community. He's effectively a monk. So his whole history is just reading a shitload of books. He was kind of like a sponsored reader. For a while. I think his wife died or committed suicide, and he just became a dishwasher, had a small apartment, and just started getting all the books from Shambhala Press, reading them, writing essays, and just crushing out books and crushing out papers and essays and stuff, and getting published. It's the Buddhist world is small enough where if you are smart and can write, you're probably going to get published.
Interesting.
Yeah, like that Tricycle magazine, I think, was something that he was publishing in a lot. But yeah, very interesting stuff. And I doubt he's had much psychedelic experience too. Like it's very unlikely Ken Wilber smoked DMT, in my opinion.
I heard him give a talk one time about, somebody asked him about like ayahuasca. I forget what he said. I think he said it could be healing, but it's obviously not like a full path towards enlightenment.
Right. And I saw an article yesterday, I think on that Tricycle magazine, saying by a long, like a 20-year meditator saying psychedelics and meditation are synergistic. So, like that's kind of the point that we've been trying to make for a while. Like, yes, all these things are synergistic. You have to have the right program, though. And it's not synergistic if you trip in the morning and meditate in the afternoon every day.
Right.
That's a problem. And you're gonna get sick. But if you schedule it out, you're probably gonna have something that works out for you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so this DMT talk really took us on a rant and crazy and down an interesting road. And we're doing this episode just as like a catch up. We've been spending a lot of time working on this integration course, and we've been lining a bunch of interviews up for the master courses. And we just launched it yesterday, which was Monday, August 7th. And so, we figured we'd just kind of get on and just chat and catch up and let you know what we've been up to. And obviously, this DMT topic just took its own little course.
If you want to learn more about it, DMTx.org. There's a way to donate there, and there's a way to get involved. You can get up on the email list and keep up with developments, and we will keep you informed through this show as well. But check it out, DMTx.org. Stay tuned to that.
But I know there was something else that we just wanted to check in, and I know we're probably like hitting an hour or so. And it was about that LSD overdose, acute LSD toxicity at Lightning in the Bottle. And Dan Safe just put out a little press release about that, possibly thinking that it was a 2,5-I overdose, 2,5-I M-bomb. So I don't know. Do we want to talk a little bit about that before?
Yeah, let's try to blast through it. And then I want to let people know about who's joining us for the masterclass. But so this lady was at Lightning in a Bottle, 20 years old, Memorial Day weekend, Lightning in a Bottle in Bradley, California. First ever fatality for Lightning in a Bottle, so kind of a big deal. They are a leader in the world of harm reduction for festivals. And long story short, coroner ruled it a acute LSD toxicity death. There is no known limit. There is typically there's this thing called LD50. 50% of people would be expected to die at this dose. And they get that, I believe, through mouse and rat tests, and kind of just extrapolate to humans. And it's not, it's not perfect, but it helps us figure out where we shouldn't go with certain molecules. Science was unable to really pin that down with rats. They were able to speculate about upper limits, but it's not really a reasonable thing. Like, nobody in their right mind would eat I don't even know, hundreds of grams, like a kilogram of LSD. You're not going to eat a kilogram of LSD. It tastes gross.
Where would you even get that? I
don't really know.
To be a manufacturer.
Nick Sand. He's dead now, but maybe he'll send you one post from the grave. And we still don't even know if that's toxic. It's going to really be a tough ride, but maybe you'll come through on the other side mentally. But there's no known toxic dose for LSD. There's a few questionable things ruled LSD toxicity in the past. But it's likely county coroners aren't up to speed on this stuff. They don't actually know that. It's kind of fucked up that the county coroner would say that without doing appropriate research. Is LSD toxic?
Mm-hmm.
No. About as toxic as apples. I don't know how to say it other than that. 2,5-I N-bomb is something being sold quite regularly at festivals as acid. People all over have been buying stuff. Oh, you're selling acid? Great, let me buy that acid from you. And they don't know what that acid is. And the only way to really know what it is to send it in for a mass spectrometry reading, or there's some cheaper spectrometry being done nowadays that you might have access to. That's how you could tell what's in the full composition of the thing. And more accessible is reagent testing, which is something we've been kind of promoting a bunch. So you can actually test your substance to find out if it actually does contain LSD or does contain MDMA. And there's all sorts of stuff you can actually test to see if it does contain 2,5-I N-bomb.
Mm-hmm.
From what I understand, 2,5-I N-bomb is a, what do we call it? Vasoconstrictor. So it could cause heart issues. So your heart could just stop at a certain point, perhaps. And what it appears
can lead to seizures too at high doses.
Some people use it recreationally and they're fine. Other people, a single, 1 or 2 doses total could kill you. You're dead before you get to the hospital, before the ambulance arrives.
Well, there was a story I'm doing some research on that. And there were like a bunch of kids that bought a strip and they cut it up into like 4 or whatever, and each took one, and 3 of the kids were fine, and the one ended up in the hospital because of it.
Exactly.
And so, it really depends on your body makeup. And also, I think the toxicity is kind of like exponentially just goes up at some certain dose. So it's like really tricky to figure that out, maybe you normally take 2 hits of acid and you take 2 hits of 2,5-I, and I mean, how much is on there first of all? And yeah, it's kind of scary.
So it's a little irresponsible that the county coroner reported it this way. What this does say, though, is that there is 2,5-I NBOM out there still. It's not going away. It's all over the dark web still. And it looks like LSD on paper. It's also being sold in gel tabs. And be really careful. Like, plan ahead. If you're going to be doing drugs at a festival or something, plan ahead. Don't just buy it in the parking lot where you can't test. If you do test at a festival, hopefully you can find somebody with a test kit. Like maybe Dance Safe is doing some work there, or some other organization like The Loop, if you're in the UK, is doing on-site testing. And go get some testing done. Find out what you're putting in your body. Anything else on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of scary to think about. You think you're getting something, and there's a lot of research chemicals floating around, and and I think that's why it's really important to think about why you want to be doing things and why you want to engage in the psychedelic process, and also be safe and test it. Because, I mean, not to spread like fear or anything, but I mean, research chemicals are going around, and it could just take one hit and land you in the hospital or worse. So it's, as what Mitchell Gomez said in our masterclass, is like a new era of drug use, because things are just showing up, like fentanyl showing up in drugs that it doesn't even make any sense, and you're getting like all these other research chemicals for, say acid or whatever. And so it is a concern.
A brave new world.
Yeah.
This is no longer the 60s. And
I was just going to say, I saw this article today about somebody ODing up in Cape Cod on fentanyl-laced marijuana. We don't know how true that is. Could happen. Could have been intentional. But why is that happening? I think it's a great reason to legalize and start regulating the things. I mean, if fentanyl is showing up in marijuana, that's ugh.
Yeah, so I don't think drug dealers want their customers to die. Some people think drug dealers are dumb and don't do math right, and could make errors. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think if you're a drug dealer and you've been in business for longer than a year, you're probably not dumb, especially if you haven't gone to jail yet, and you could probably do a little bit of math. So, maybe somebody, theoretically, maybe somebody bought shitty weed. It was their first drug deal. They bought some fentanyl off the dark web and, made some sort of liquid solution, sprayed it all over the weed, and, just hope for the best. And maybe somebody OD'd. It could be that simple, but we don't know. So be careful out there. Like, know your grower or buy from a state that's regulated, because you really don't know. Or test your stuff. Maybe just test a little leaf for fentanyl. I don't really know the best way to do that, but figure it out. There's fentanyl test strips now from Dance Safe. So they're cheaper than going to the hospital. So buy one.
Well, Mitchell was saying in our master class that, like, if you had a powder or something, you really need to test the whole thing, right?
He was saying that was the best way to do it. So
yeah,
you would, for example, if you had a powder, you could turn it into a liquid solution and then do the test strip in that, and it would show up at the nanogram per milliliter level. Just a couple nanograms per milliliter it would show. So even if it was like a super trace amount, it's way sublethal, it would still show up. So then you would have to make the decision, like, what do I do with this illegal thing I had purchased and now own? I don't know, act carefully, act very carefully with it. Hopefully you throw it out, but if not, be smart, be very smart, be careful. But yeah, that's the best way to do it if you have a larger quantity of anything. And there's techniques all over the internet for that kind of method. I don't really know the way to do it, but you can find that out.
Yeah. Cool
to talk about the masterclass briefly.
Yeah, let's jump in.
So navigating psychedelics, lessons on integration and self-care is something Kyle and I have been working really hard on, and we really hope you check it out if you have the time or inclination. You can get a little peek at what we've got over at psychedelicstoday.teachable.com, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be really good for you. How to be safe on the internet, the differences between tryptamines, phenethylamines, deliriants, some stuff on the mechanisms of action of psychedelics, all sorts of stuff. We go a lot deeper than just that. And we even worked with people to get masterclasses, exclusive masterclass interviews with people. Here's kind of a list of folks that contributed anywhere from 20 minutes to over an hour of masterclass content. Lenny Gibson, our breathwork teacher, Elizabeth Gibson, also our breathwork teacher, Larry Norris from Erie. I think he was even on the show in the past, and we had a great interview with him. He directs Erie and the Bay Area, doing a lot of harm reduction services and integration circles. Psychedelic.
We haven't had him on the show.
We haven't.
We just had him in the masterclass, and for some reason we think we interviewed Julie though. Julie was on our show.
Maybe it's that we met him in Oakland. I got to spend some time with him in Oakland.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time with him in Oakland.
You'll hear him on the show soon enough, people. And he is great, super smart, very helpful. And then Paul Austin, the Third Wave, who you guys all know, helps us out with some information on microdosing and implications around it, probably a little bit on how to do it, why to do it. And Shannon Claire Carlin, she just recently changed her name. Yeah, that's right. Yep. She just got married. Congratulations, Shannon. She was working with Kyle on the MAPS integration list for a bit, helping coordinate the work there, and is the MDMA therapy training program manager for MAPS. So helping quite a bit with the MDMA research. And it looks like, talking about MAPS and integration, finding a therapist, and harm reduction services, and spreading integration.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine McLean, who we've had on the show, I think. Yeah, we have. Yeah. And she was involved with the John Hopkins psilocybin research, facilitating a lot of sessions, and this got really popular with a TED Talk about working with dying patients, and then having to work with her sister who was dying. She didn't do psychedelic therapy with her sister, but she was able to be there in a different way after doing all that work with patients who were dying. She has a lot to share.
Yeah, and she also included, I went to the integration circle at the Center for Optimal Living
in New York
in New York. Yeah, and we recorded a little meditation that she came up with. I think she calls it the RAFT meditation. So it's a cool little meditation to get back into your psychedelic experience and to have re-experience it and just meditate on it. So that's included in the course.
Cool. Well, we have a lot. I'll just blast through the rest of these people. Sorry for not giving you guys enough length, but Ashley Booth, founder of the Aware Project, co-founder of Inner Space Integration. We have a long, awesome conversation with her about 5-MeO DMT. Neil Marshall Goldsmith, PhD, who you guys probably know from past interviews here and elsewhere. He is helping coordinate the Horizons NYC conference. He talks about a lot of great stuff about microdosing, small behavioral changes, integration and prep work, and we go all over the map with him. Mitchell Gomez, the executive director of Dance Safe. We talked to him about drug testing, harm reduction, and safety. Julie Megler, who is also with Erie. She's fantastic. We talked to her about ayahuasca, prepping for ayahuasca sessions, intention setting, spiritual emergency, and much more. Phil Marie Narlock, PsyD. She is the training manager with Students for Sensible Drug Policy. We talked to her about identifying drug emergencies and some interventions you can do some really helpful stuff around fentanyl and Narcan. Naloxone is another term for that, I think. And Michelle Hobart, who we haven't had on the show yet, but she's going to be a star. We talked to her about, or Kyle gets to talk to her about spiritual emergence and self-care. Hopefully we get to add an additional Q&A webinar with her there. And we have others as well. We're hoping, I'm still holding out hope that we get Dennis McKenna on. I'm going to work really hard to make that happen. He has a lot to share about ayahuasca, and I think there's plenty that others can share too. We're working to get, what's this gentleman's name?
Grossman?
Grossman. Yep. That's it. Mr. Richard Grossman from, what's his organization called? Healing Ceremonies. Yeah, so he leads a lot of retreats to Peru, and I think he does some really great education, harm reduction, facilitation with ayahuasca. So can't wait to have him share his experience. He's definitely an elder in the California world. So plenty of stuff there, and we really hope it's worth your time, and you take the time to get more educated on psychedelics. These are some of the most powerful things known to interact with the human mind, which is the most complex thing we know about in the universe. So be careful, get prepared, do your homework, keep you and your friends safe. Anything you want to add in?
No, I think you got it. I'm also excited too. I'm trying to get my buddy to come on and do a masterclass on cacao ceremonies.
Yes.
Because we used to run them together up in Vermont. And I think cacao is a really great medicine to work with as part of the integration phase, but also, just it's a nice heart medicine to work with. So, hopefully his schedule will line up and we'll get an interview with him and see what that's all about.
Yeah, cacao being the precursor to chocolate. So check that out. It's a really complex plant pharmacologically and very helpful. It's, there's a lot of data about chocolate being healthy, and there's certain reasons for that. And what if you could amplify the benefits in your home safely and, use it as a pre-post psychedelic session? I don't even know what to call that. Preparation? I don't know. Medicine. Call it a medicine. Yeah. It's not psychedelic, but it's close.
Yeah. And the one person that he learned from said cacao, like psychedelics will push you through the door, but cacao will gently bring you to the door. And then it's your option if you want to walk through it. We would pair it up with breath work and shamanic drumming and stuff like that. And, definitely had some powerful experiences. But, regarding the course, it's a great way to support the show. So yeah, we hope you check it out, and we're gonna have, we have 10 master classes up there right now. We've been slowly releasing some, but we're hoping to add more in there. So if anything, you'll get a bunch of exclusive interviews that we're not featuring on the show here.
And it's the best way probably to get up to speed on this stuff, to be as safe as possible as soon as possible. And we are here to support you guys as students, and as listeners, just feel free to reach out if you have questions. psychedelicstoday@gmail.com. And one final announcement. We are looking at a 3-day retreat in Denver in December. The weekend would be 15, 16, 17. So please hit us up if you're interested in that. It's weekend before Christmas. I guess really 2 weekends before Christmas, but 15, 16, 17. Check it out and see if you're free. Let us know if you're interested in coming. We're going to do breath work. We might do some cacao. We're going to do a lot of the content from our class there. And we're going to, really just get into it and see what you guys want. And it's going to be a really amazing weekend. So I think that's it for now. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will catch you in our class or on the next episode.